Jeremiah chapters 21 to 30 today, and again we're doing quite a big chunk here because there's a lot in Jeremiah. It's a big old long book, but I'm not really interested in, there's a lot of repetition going on, and actually I'm just looking for the bits that stick out above what we'd already covered in Isaiah. So we're covering not much stuff from quite a big chunk of writing. This one opens with King Zedekiah, who is the last king of Judah, coming to Jeremiah because there's trouble brewing with Babylon, and saying, is there any chance that this Nebuchadnezzar guy from Babylon is just going to sort of sod off? And Jeremiah's answer is basically no, but he has some interesting advice for him, that you could just sort of surrender and go off in exile. He does labour the point though that God is very determined that Judah is getting both barrels no matter what happens now. It's too late basically to repent and save themselves. It's interesting though, this idea that Jeremiah advises him just to surrender and be exiled, because that sort of sounds sort of okay and reasonable in the context of what we know happens. But if you remove that and put it in the context of something like one of Winston Churchill's advisors or something, Hitler's advancing and saying all sorts of belligerent things, and advisors saying, nah, it's all right, just surrender and he can come over and sort that out. History would not judge that person very well. And obviously based on the outcome, but resistance was obviously a very good idea in that context. In this one, we don't really know necessarily what would have happened if they had resisted. I don't think, on the basis that I don't believe they did resist. They just seemed to just get trampled straight over. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, that what Jeremiah is saying could be very, very challenging outside that context. But you sort of almost give it a benefit of the doubt because God says this and we've presented it in a certain way. But yeah, at the time, you'd basically been a traitor, wouldn't you? So, yeah, difficult one to know quite what to do with. In chapter 22, verse 5, there's this really interesting bit. Basically, God is saying, do as you're told. And he says, if you don't, I swear by myself, and then yada, yada, yada. And it's an interesting idea, if I swear by myself, because you can envisage a situation where, saying to my daughter or something, brush your teeth, or I swear to God, I'm going to throw lettuce at you or something. And maybe I should try out. I swear by myself, if you don't do this, then I will do that, whatever. And it's an interesting idea, because I'm not entirely clear what you're even saying when I swear to God, or swear by God that I'm doing this. What does that even actually mean if you swear something by something else? Maybe the answer to that is really obvious, I just don't know, but just picked up more for being vaguely entertaining anyway. Otherwise, though, a lot of this is just going on and on and on about why the Israelites are being punished and why Babylon's coming, basically. And it's, as it occurred, it's almost like if someone walks in the room and smacks you around the head, what was that for? There is no way you could ask that question in this context. It's kind of boring. Just keep reading. Yes, I get it. The Israelites are being bad. This Babylon thing's coming. But, you've got to say, it is not unclear what's happening and why. Chapter 23, verse 5, meanwhile, is, I think, the particularly interesting bit of this. So we're going to call for the keeper of the book, and I shall read this bit to you. It says, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will live safely. This is the name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteous Saviour. And this was particularly interesting, I thought. So I've got my Hebrew translation Bible-y thing, and I looked up, what word did they have for Lord there? And it is the word that translates as Yahweh. So it's basically saying that this future king guy's coming is in his days, so days plural, as in the period he's around, Israel will live safely, which doesn't seem really to match up with what's happened. But then we do have that this guy is going to be called Yahweh, as in God. So it's not saying this is just some dude who's going to be born of David and do stuff. It is actually saying this guy is going to be God, or at least it seems to be. And that's really tricky, because that's some of this stuff. Just Israel is going to live safely. That doesn't really happen, which sort of suggests that maybe this isn't a prediction of Jesus. It's tricky to reconcile that anyway. I guess you could do it, but then it's quite explicit, sat there in black and white, that it's saying that this guy who's going to turn up as a son of David, sort of thing, is God. Yeah, so there's this interesting question for the New Testament that seems to suggest that, Bart Ehrman I've heard suggest that Jesus never claimed to be God. And it doesn't look like that holds up particularly well. But here in the Old Testament, they're saying this guy who's coming is God. So, yeah, it's a really interesting part of that. And it ties into other bits as well, because there's this talk of, if you take out the Yahweh reference, it sounds a little bit like all this prophecy stuff is just talking about the Israelites coming back from Babylon to Jerusalem later on, which we know happens later on under Artaxerxes, whatever his name is. But then you're throwing back in this God is coming later on to do this stuff. So it makes it very difficult to know what to do with it. But again, it's that whole problem of interpretation of, not metaphorical stuff, but this stuff isn't that explicit. I mean, if it just said a guy called Jesus is going to be born in a stable and it's going to be weird and he's going to move along there, then he's going to die and you're going to think, oh, that's weird, but then it's actually, that's what he's here for and it's going to be great. You can sort of work with it, but it's irritating as hell when you just make prophecies that can be translated or interpreted in different ways. It's so hard to know what to do with it. We have another reference back to false prophets, which was mentioned in the previous video, the one before, I can't remember which one it was. And it seems that this useful test for how you test a false prophet is by what they say, does it come true or not? Great, yeah, thanks. Not particularly helpful in the case of Isaiah, for example, who was predicting things hundreds of years away. And Jeremiah, to be fair, is talking about this son of God, this person who is God coming. And obviously that's a few hundred years away yet, so that doesn't particularly work. But then to illustrate it, we encounter our first false prophet, I think it's our first one, a chap called Hananiah, who basically goes around saying, don't worry, all this stuff that's brewing with Babylon, it's going to be all over in 2 years. Don't worry about it. It's all going to be fine. And this is obviously very counter to what Jeremiah is saying, that this is going to be a big old problem. You're going to be exiled and it's going to be 70 years before anyone can come back. So they have a sort of a profit off, for want of a better word. But Jeremiah wins this hands down because he prophesies that Hananiah is going to be dead within a year because he's been lying to people. And 7 months later, he is in fact dead. So, don't be a false prophet is clearly the order of the day there. That's just a weird thing to try and be, actually, isn't it? I guess we have people at the minute who try and forecast things. And the finance world where I work, it's rife with it. People just trying to predict what's going to happen, despite the fact it's blatantly obvious you can't, because there are no such things as crystal balls. And you never know at any point if Donald Trump's going to go and do something weird that we didn't know was coming. Yeah, and I make quite a good living out of working out how to deal with the fact that you don't know what's going to happen. So I'm sort of the anti-false prophet, or the anti-prophet, I suppose. So yes, I guess that we'd stick with that. Don't be a false prophet. Bad idea. We then have another weird bit that seems to be a characteristic of the book of Jeremiah, where God sends Jeremiah to go and shout some stuff at the temple, and they talk about perhaps they will listen. This is God, apparently, as relayed by Jeremiah, which doesn't make any sense because there's no way God wouldn't know. Assuming he exists, then he would know. So yeah, Jeremiah keeps doing that, and it's a bit of an odd way of doing it. It doesn't go well anyway. Jeremiah goes to the temple and preaches all this stuff, and they just try and kill him. So that doesn't go great. But he gets out of it very craftily by just saying to people, no, don't kill me, because if you do, God will be mad. And you just sort of think, yeah, okay, great, they're going to kill him. But no, they turn around and say, oh, right, okay, off you go then. And it's, I guess if you're covering a massive event, a big story, there's probably a lot of detail that we just don't have. So I guess that's probably how that works there. And then finally, we finish off with Jeremiah basically writes a letter to the exiles, basically just saying, yeah, go relax, groovy, go and make a life over there, just accept it, and you'll be able to come back in 70 years. And again, it's that interesting tie-up with the idea that in the Second World War context, someone projecting that sort of thing would not have gone well. Just go and live in Germany, it's going to be fine, or let them come here and just accept that you're all going to be speaking German. So it's basically Jeremiah surely in the day would have been treated as a traitor, and to be fair, he's not treated very well. I mean, the guy's beaten up, and in the next video we find he's thrown down a big hole and all sorts of things. So yeah, don't be a false prophet, but you probably don't actually also want to be a prophet either. But yeah, so there's some more of the interesting stuff. There's a huge chunk of writing, that part of all of these are, so there's not much to have actually come out of it, but we'll keep marching through and we shall be finished, I think, with Jeremiah fairly soon. But it's still interesting, we're finding a few new bits in there at least.